Namaste, Jai Gurudev. My name is Shakti, Prem, Anand. I'm from Yoga I Am, and we're on Insta Live going to talk about relationships and self-love, the relationship with oneself and self-care, and together with how that's relevant for self-realization or awakening even. So we'll just wait and let people join us. Namaste, Jai Gurudev Raj. Thank you for joining, and if you have any questions on that, then please write them down also. Let's just begin with chanting Om 3 times. Take a deep inhale. Om. And again. Om. And again. Deep inhale. Om. So, what is self-love? If we break that down into what is self and what is love, then that will enable us to have a better understanding of self-love. If we break those 2 words down, they're quite powerful words actually, both the self and then the love, and full of connotations of how different people perceive self-love to be. Thank you everyone for joining us, and Happy New Year's Eve to all of you, and hope 2021 is going to be full of love and self-love in particular. So why did I choose this topic? Well, actually it chose me. Over 20 years ago I wrote a book called Living from the Heart, which is available on Amazon, and it's actually my previous, it's by my real name, which is Shira Basi. Shakti Prem Anand is a spiritual name that was given to me, and so I use that not from an ego sense, but just it actually personifies all that I'm teaching as well, because it means a force of love, and that's really the program that we're creating for everybody in that way. So what is self and what is love? And in this book I actually wrote about the shift from fear to self-love. And why was it that way? Why was it from fear to self-love? Because often it's those little barriers, those veils, if you like, that block us from revealing our self-love and opening up to love. And we don't mean this love sense in a romantic way. It's not that transactional, I love you, and then, oh my God, I don't feel it anymore. It's not that sort of a love we're talking about, where it's a very emotional attachment often, and transactional, and pretty much from the animal instinct of the lower chakra base level of love that most people usually associate love with. And safety, I think also people associate love with feeling safe. But the love that we're talking about here in terms of the self-love, the self-care and the self-realization, which is all a progressive awakening process, is actually a state of being. So the state of being isn't something that you think about. It's not something you say, I'm going to be love. I mean, love isn't a thought. It's actually not a story. It's not something that comes from your mind. It's actually outside of your mind. It's a way of being that overwhelms you from within. It's a state of consciousness actually, and in Sanskrit they call it Ananda, which is far better description than unconditional love, because that kind of has a lot of connotations. So if we use this word Ananda, the Sanskrit name, which is also the end of my name, Shakti Prem Anand, which basically means this love state. Let's call it the love state rather than just love. Then one gets an idea of what that means. It stands for contentment, for bliss, and even though things are happening in your life that you may be like wobbly and falling over, and a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of reaction to life, and coming from very much a fear modality, this state of love doesn't actually allow you to go that far towards that barometer. So if this was fear and this was love, then if you're in the state of love rather than that transactional love, you couldn't really come to fear. You could observe fear, and then you would rebound back. So it's almost like an elastic band. It's a level of consciousness that doesn't let you go beyond anything lower than that vibrational frequency. So that's the kind of love state that we're talking about here. And then also in terms of the self, what is the self? Well, the self is really a higher self. It's not your identity, it's not the ego self that we're talking about here, because it's the ego self that actually attaches itself and wants and desires and has judgments and opinions, how things should look a certain way, how love should be a certain way. And it's very much a personality-based love coming from that lower place. So that the self is really a higher vibrational frequency. It's more of a group level of consciousness. It's more of a outside of your identity, outside of your personality. That's the kind of self that we're talking about here. I don't want to sort of have segregation, because there is no them and us when it comes to that self that we're talking about. There's a unity that comes from that self. There's an understanding of the oneness which is felt, and it's beyond experience, beyond words. And although I'm trying to describe it here and trying to give you some idea of it, the closest that one gets to that would be the description of light. So suffice it to say that light personifies this one self that I'm talking about here. Yeah. And so when you're moving from this place of fear to self-love, then these two boxes of what is love and what is self and have to be brought together, because you can't get to a state of love being if you're not in the self-awareness presence of light state. So the two are very much interlinked, and so you can see that there's a journey, there are levels of consciousness to get through in order to come to this state of beingness of a self-love rather than doing love. Yeah, it's not just like taking care of your hair, taking care of your makeup, making sure you look good and making sure you're putting on that smile, doing your positive affirmations, I can do that. It's not that mental torture. Yeah, it's really arriving at it. It's a presence. It's not that high level rah motivation either. It's coming from a very level state of being where you're personifying this state because it's naturally a part of who you are. So that's what we're talking about here in this self-love. So if anyone has any questions, please do ask on that, and I gladly try to answer on that. And if you want to get a copy of the book, it's available from Amazon. It's Living from the Heart, Moving from Fear to Self-Love. I wrote it over 20 years ago, and it has some pretty good exercises on the end of each chapter, and it goes through life as a series of seasons as well. So I think we're all now probably have finished COVID here this year, coming through the autumn and winter season. So let's just randomly pick a sentence that comes from here. There is a deconstruction of you from forms to one without limits, and form to yourself as nature and love. You are supreme more than you know, and tapping into this self-love is your birthright as a human. It is fine that this paradoxical concept may not be clear to you, but stay with it. Your experience of awareness will awaken, knowing the unknown within. There is no trying in loving. It's beingness of you. Be who you are without any effort. There is a natural order that manifests once you accept the truth of yourself. There is no arriving. You are there. It's covered up by your identifying externally. So it's all about within. It's all about internalizing who you really are. And as I said, it's a level of consciousness of awakening when it's imbibed. So hence the self-realization. So, you start from the external world of people who go into relationships often. They say, oh, I fancy that girl, or, and then after a few years that suddenly the love crashes down and they say, I no longer fancy her. So that's very much an external modality of loving. The kind of loving we're talking about is coming from within. It's beyond your identity, beyond your ego, and arriving at, as I said, that level of consciousness of ananda, or contentment or bliss. So Dr. A.J. Sani, hi, thank you for joining, and if you have any questions, then please ask anybody. And let's make this interactive. So I just wanted to introduce that so you had an idea of the kind of self-love we're talking about and the self-care. Hello, Mel Crinch. Thank you for joining. We're just speaking about self-love and saying how that is different from the externalizing of the love, where there's a separation. Here in the self-love that we're talking about, there is no separation. There is a unity. There's an understanding of the oneness within that, and it's a state of being where the work that you do with your shadows, with life's experiences, with the dark night of the soul, and with just all the challenges that life faces you, especially this year in particular. And then as you overcome those, then you eventually arrive at what I call the state of being of self-love, which is not the external romantic love. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's just recognizing the layers of consciousness of which self-love we're talking about. If anyone has any questions, then please do write, or if you want to share anything as well, then please do engage. It's an interactive session on self-love. And so all of our Insta Lives here are interactive, although very few people join. Most of them are very quiet. So who's just joined us? Hunan, would you like to share anything on this? What is self-love for you? And I was mentioning earlier that I wrote a book 20 years ago of this shift from fear to self-love, Living from the Heart by Shirabasi. It's available on Amazon, and you can Google it, etc. So it's a level of consciousness. It's the highest form of consciousness because it really allows you to be in your unconditional loving state. People have returned to the Christ consciousness, they've turned to samadhi, but that's like the level. And so all the work that we do with Yoga Where I Am in the Force of Love Academy, with relationships, is really to get you to this level. Because here, when you are here, then life just happens. There is no trying, there's no effort, there's no resistance to life. Life just flows. You're in that flow, momentum state. People come, people go, circumstances come and circumstances go, etc., etc. So life is very fluid. It's like in the Tao they say, be water. So you literally are like that because you're not resisting life. You don't see life as a threat and a fear. Yeah, you accept what is happening. There's an acceptance involved in that, which is coming from deep within, because it's coming from the knowingness. And that knowingness isn't coming from your mind or your chat or your belief systems or whatever values you've held in life. No, it's coming from a stage that's beyond that. There's no separation. There's none of me, you. Hence, this state of love is something that is shared. And a lot of people who are disconnected from their hearts, which is, and they're very much intellectual, or they're detached from their emotionals, and this way of allowing vulnerability, because there's a vulnerability involved here, because you're offering this unconditional love. Most people can't take it. Most people actually don't know how to receive love, or even give it, because it's not a giving, it's who you are, and so you're sharing of yourself. And I think most people that are so stuck on fear that it feels uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable when somebody just undresses themselves, and they undress themselves to reveal this love, to reveal this deep compassion and kindness and just a genuine authenticity of acceptance. And people can't be with that. Yeah, people, it's like Marianne Williamson said, it's not our darkness, but it's our light that we fear. Yeah, she basically was right. And so what happens is that the light of one's person gets dimmed and dimmed and dim until they also shrink, yeah, and they're also living in this fear bubble where, so you got all these fear bubbles interacting, boom, 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 and then the people who are operating at this self-love, or this unconditional love, are actually not here, because they've moved out. They've moved out of the fear modality. They've either gone to the ashrams, or they've gone to the Himalayas, or they've become teachers, but they're often very alone and isolated, because at this level of frequency of love that we're talking about, this self-love, this unconditional love level, they tend to be teachers, or they've moved out of society, because the society generally consciousness level is very much a fear consciousness level, and so to engage with that on a day-to-day basis is quite challenging. So that's what we're talking about. Anybody got any questions on self-love and want to get invited on this call? No one. Everyone's too scared. Okay. Well, if nobody wants to have any questions on this, then I will close the session. And as I said, you're more than welcome to get our book, Living from the Heart, which moves from fear to self-love, from Amazon by Shira Basi. So let's just close this session and chant Om 3 times. Take a deep breath in. Om. 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 Thank you for those who've joined just now, but we are closing the session on this self-love, and I wish you all a Happy New Year and a Merry Christmas that's just gone by, and may you all find your unconditional love state, Ananda, in 2021. Jai Gurudev.